Good day, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the Government of Indonesia and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for organizing this very important event, this very important series of exchanges, because in a COVID context where digitization of G2P payments and their use for social assistance at very large scale is becoming a very important policy objective for various governments. So I think this is a very timely discourse, it's a very timely discussion, and I want to thank you for taking the lead in promoting this discourse. I wanted to focus the attention on SARS, which is the Government of Pakistan's new poverty alleviation program, and the manner in which it is institutionalizing the digitization of payments and financial inclusion more broadly. So I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes focusing on that aspect specifically. Just to give you a background, SARS is the Government of Pakistan's new poverty alleviation program. It's an ambitious program with 140 policies, programs, initiatives. They target 14 vulnerable groups. This is the largest social protection program ever launched in the history of the country, and the government has created an extensive institutional infrastructure for it. An extensive budget has been set aside, a new ministry has been created, and a whole digital infrastructure has been created for the execution of SARS. What you see on the slide in front of you are the various target groups and the manner in which the different policies, programs, and elements are stacked against them in favor of those target groups. I just want to outline in passing that these 140 policies, programs, and initiatives are all linked by theory of change. These are not a disparate set of programs disconnected from each other. There's thinking behind them. So if there is one of the policy elements focuses on reducing the cost of handsets, which is very relevant to today's discussion, it is done for a purpose because there's a very aggressive agenda to promote financial inclusion as part of the framework of the SARS. As evidence of that, I would like to present to you the time-bound outcome-based goals that are part of the SARS framework. And here up on the slide, you can see that of the 7 time-bound outcome-based goals, one of the goals focuses on financial inclusion. And when we had conceptualized SARS, this was back in March of 2019, the idea was that by the end of the 5 years, we would aim for financial and digital inclusion of 7 million individuals, of which 90% were women. But at that time, we were not aware that we would have to operate in a COVID context. And in the COVID context, this number would go up to 15 million, which is a huge jump. So even behind the dark cloud of COVID, there are some silver linings. And one of the silver lining for us was the sudden augmentation of the number of individuals which would be our target with regard to the financial inclusion objective. Back in 2019, when SARS was conceptualized, as I've already mentioned, financial inclusion was a very salient and important part of it. And we had the privilege of having Her Majesty Queen Maxima over, and in her presence, the financial inclusion strategy of SARS, which I'm just going to, and I'm just going to do a deep dive into that. In her presence, that financial inclusion strategy was unveiled. This was predicated on the understanding that financial inclusion and savings are actually a very salient part of poverty graduation. In order to execute that agenda, we did a procurement of a biometric payment system, a digital biometric payment system, and in that payment system, for the first time, we introduced 2 elements, a limited mandate account and a savings account. So the idea was that all the SARS beneficiaries would have the option of either keeping their money in a limited mandate account and after a biometric signature withdrawing that, or the option of moving money into a savings account. And for Pakistan and the social protection landscape and for the financial inclusion landscape, bringing 7 million women into this framework was really a quantum jump. Very soon we will be transitioning this system to a new system. So what I presented to you was the first generation reform, where we did a procurement of a new biometric system, where we moved women to savings accounts, and that transition is currently underway. But very soon we will be moving to another ecosystem which is being established by the Central Bank of Pakistan, where there will be interoperability between the ecosystems of banks and the ecosystem of the telecom operators. And once the micro-payment gateway has been installed by the Central Bank of Pakistan, then any individual anywhere in the country, recipient of SAS social protection funds, will be able to go and either withdraw money or save, and that is reform too for us. So the ecosystem of 7 million females and the social assistance and the first generation of payment reform and then the second generation of payment reform was one pillar of the SARS financial inclusion strategy. And as I mentioned, we suddenly jumped from 7 to 15. The second component of the financial inclusion strategy of SARS was enhancing credit for women. And we launched a poverty graduation strategy, and access to loans was part of that. Under this, we are giving 80,000 in loans every month, and more than 50% of these is going to women. The thinking behind the National Poverty Graduation Initiative was that the lowest rung would be covered through safety nets, and that we will, through appropriate financial inclusion initiatives and access to savings accounts, familiarize them to this space, and the government would give them cash grants. But once they have some ability to access credit, we will make another window available to them, and then gradually over a period of time they would graduate and they would start accessing the commercial market for loans. So there was a whole strategy which the government is currently implementing, and that's the second limb of the financial inclusion aspect under SARS. The third aspect of financial inclusion under SARS related to the informal sector. The informal sector is huge and very large in Pakistan. According to our labor force survey, there are 27 million workers in Pakistan who either earn daily wages or piece rate remuneration or are self-employed in Pakistan's very large informal economy. And the payments to them are through cash exclusively. So about a year ago, we put together a labor welfare and social protection expert group, and the report of the expert group has just been unveiled. One of the salient recommendations of the report is that we should commence paying these workers in the informal sector through the banking system. And now the government is on the way to implementing this through a variety of different interventions. So this is the third pillar of the financial inclusion strategy under SARS. And just to recap, it's the 7 million women who are at the lowest rung, to whom we will ensure access to low-cost handsets, who get stipends from the government, and who now have access to savings accounts. That's the first link. The second is the acceleration of the credit, and the third piece is bank accounts for informal workers. In addition, we have also made sure that all the payments that are made under the SARS umbrella, and by the way, SARS means compassion, which is why it's the name for the government's new poverty alleviation initiatives. We have made sure that all the payments that are being done under all the SARS initiatives are through the formal banking system. And here you see an illustration up on the screen of 3 programs: the SARS Scholarship Initiative, the SARS Conditional Cash Transfer focused on health and nutrition, and the SARS Conditional Cash Transfer centered on education outcomes. And the payments to billions of individuals through the SARS ecosystem are made exclusively through bank accounts with appropriate financial literacy interventions. So I just want to give you, so this was just a background of what SARS, what the umbrella program is, what the 3 pillars of social protection under these pillars, what the 3 pillars of financial inclusion are, and how we are pushing the needle on each of these. I want to spend a couple of minutes on the COVID context and financial inclusion and what our efforts were there and how they helped us accelerate our efforts and push the needle even further. So SARS Emergency Cash basically was a response to COVID. As you know, Pakistan did extremely well, fingers crossed so far, in the COVID situation, both on the health side and also on the social protection side. As I've already mentioned, 27 million workers who daily wage, piece rate wage, working in the informal sector. When you look at it in the context of family size, 160 million individuals were in dire distress, and the government decided to roll out an emergency cash package for 15 million individuals. Over $1 billion was allocated, and this was the largest social protection program in the history of the country. When it concluded, it reached out to 15 million and impacted 100 million individuals, over half the country's population. What we leveraged for this was the biometric system and a SMS-based assistance-seeking structure that we had created, and we coupled this with data analytics. It was all end-to-end, digital, cell phone-based, where payments were biometrically, 100% of the payments were biometrically verified, and the 16-digit national identity card number, which was sent to us by people, was basically analyzed against various databases, and then messages of payment were generated to them on their cell phones. And across the length and breadth of this 5th largest, in population terms, the 5th largest country of the world, there were thousands of payment centers where people who had lost their livelihoods would go with their cell phones and the payment notification from the government and receive money totally through biometric means. There are very important learnings from the digital payment perspective, from the financial inclusion perspective, from the financial literacy perspective, based on this very large-scale execution. And I would be very pleased to share these learnings. We've also released an interim report, and the formal report will soon come, because up on the slide you can see the range of different difficulties that we faced, and of course we brought them to a successful resolution, and we developed a solution to each of the difficulties that we faced. But what I want to stress, very much relevant to the theme of this conference, was that the lack of financial literacy was a major problem for us. I recall having gone to a laborers' congregation in the first week when we had rolled out this 8171 SMS campaign, as it came to be known, and every laborer had a cell phone in their hand, and half of them told me, we do not know how to SMS. We do not know how to SMS was what I heard from them. So the lack of financial literacy was a major constraint. And of course, we developed the solutions to that. We mobilized volunteers and the rest of it. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that as we roll out our digital inclusion initiatives, our financial inclusion initiatives, as we focus on accelerating the digitization of G2P payments and working with the central banks and accelerating and deepening our own footprint, we as a government are very conscious that unless appropriate interventions are going to make in financial literacy, we are not going to be able to, we will not be successful, and therefore we are heavily investing in this. The second important learning relevant to today's discussion was that if we have to move towards an ecosystem of digitizing payments, then appropriate investments will also have to be made on creating incentive from on the merchant side. Which again is also something which is the focus of our intervention. So just to conclude, of course, we had massive know-how in designing and implementing a massive national program in a context of uncertainty and speed, and we'll be very happy to share these lessons and to learn from others. Our report, which the interim version of which is in the public domain and the final version of which will be launched next week, we feel is the right peg through which we can start a conversation with other countries and other stakeholders who perhaps are at a similar level as us. And I feel that we all can significantly benefit from capitalizing on sharing of experiences. Thank you very much for inviting Pakistan to be part of this conversation, and I hope that this will be the beginning of a much more in-depth discourse.